it's time for the Voice of Wrestling. We are back celebrating the new year with you because it's been that long since we've been on the air. Chris Cash, I'm your host alongside Nick Paglino. And as always, we have plenty to talk about. That's really what we should do. We should start running the the Voice of Wrestling as like pay-per-views. No weekly programming like Raw or SmackDown or anything, but Nick, we should run them like pay-per-views, build up. So every month we have a show and we know we'll have plenty to talk about, because when you go week to week, sometimes we scratch our heads and wonder whether we have enough to talk about. And then like last week, we've got new software and some new stuff we're using in the show. We actually do spend an hour and a half recording the program only to realize, and we find something to talk about for an hour and a half, but then we realize that the audio was all messed up, and by the end of it, you and I were like, we're not recording this again, so we're taking one more week off before we come back and celebrate the new year. I mean, it's been like a month since we've been on the air, so clearly we have a lot to talk about, and I feel like maybe that should be our strategy.
Well, and then if it is, the good thing about that, like we can just kind of borrow a play from Raw this week where, like, you know, we're building up to that monthly show and then someone makes a decision to like pull you from the show and replace you at the very end.
People would love that. People would love that 100%.
I think people would really love that.
But
I'm wondering if it's a situation where, like, you know, we get like some higher authority figure in Fight TV, you know, like the Vince McMahon of Fight TV decides that, you know, both of us are pulled from the show. And so it's basically just 1 hour of both of our backgrounds.
Oh, there we go. I love it.
And to make it even worse, my background, as you can see now, is without the Christmas tree. New Year's resolution. I accomplished it. No Christmas tree. I wanted to get it out of there before April, before WrestleMania. That was my New Year's resolution. Get rid of the tree before WrestleMania. I accomplished it. Now I have nothing to do for the rest of the year but concentrate on the Voice of Wrestling.
You know what I think? You know what I think a good show would be at some point, since we can only talk about like substantial things, you know, once every month. Maybe one of the other weekly shows we could do is all the things that offend wrestling fans these days that WWE do. We can do our own version of it. So, for example, one of the cameos on 1 week's show would be us walking, you know, the cameras would walk into you in your dressing room or your bathroom, your back's to us, and you're holding up your man bra, and then fans are just going to be pissed because that's exploiting, you know, Jews or whatever you are, terrorist.
Right, whatever, exactly.
Whatever
the
are.
Exploitation of the week.
Whatever you are, we're not sure really what Nick is.
Let me just clarify, too, that I have no problem with the Fight cameras walking in on me getting dressed as long as they give me one of those bedazzled lattes that Alexa Bliss was drinking on Raw this week. Did you notice that the cup was actually bedazzled with jewelry?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You bring me one of those, and you can interrupt me while I'm in the bathtub.
I love it. We are going to talk about Alexa Bliss, and we're going to talk about specifically, though, how that kind of goes into some of the shakeups and whether or not this is what some fans believe to be some sort of thing back to the Attitude Era. Obviously, there were some mentions of ruthless aggression on Raw this week. There's plenty to talk about, obviously, as I mentioned. I do want to kind of, again, real quick before we get into the main event this week, throw out my condolences to all my fellow Cowboys fans out there for once again being let down, one and out. You know, Nick, I know you're a big football fan as well. You're a sports fan in general, but your Detroit Lions didn't have a great season. I know you're looking for some changes. I know you wrote an article actually recently on Matt Stafford, which I thought was interesting, and so you can relate to the Cowboys fans and their woes, because it does get old being a Cowboy fan sometimes. But needless to say, it's hey, we're undefeated for next year. We're undefeated next year.
Romo's doing a great job on commentary.
He's not overrated. He doesn't.
He doesn't make you feel any better.
He doesn't blow. Hey, look, he's making it further. He's making it further in the playoffs. Way to go, Romo.
That's true. He's gonna make it. Well, he's gonna do what he's always done. He's gonna make it almost to the Super Bowl.
Almost to the Super Bowl.
And then he'll get replaced by Joe Buck and Troy Aikman.
Right.
So.
All right, so we're going to move on to the
Troy Aikman.
And Troy Aikman. Hey, he at least knows he can make it there.
Come on, man.
We still
There's
have
always a Cowboy.
There's still hope for us Cowboys fans yet. But hey, my Mavericks have Luka Doncic, and so I am thrilled about that. So there is hope for us Dallas sports fans, just not as it relates to the Cowboys. But we're not here to talk about football or amazing rookies in the NBA. We're here to talk about WWE right now in the main event. We'll be right back. Speaking of rookies, WWE, we have an idea of who the rookies are. I don't know when they graduate in WWE, Nick, but obviously, they have to at some point. Finn Balor is no longer a rookie in WWE, but it feels like he is because he hasn't really gotten his shot. And now Finn Balor fans are thinking the shakeup, everything that's going on in WWE is finally going to make the WWE management see him for what he really should be, and look at them listening to the fans, and now they make the changes, and of course we'll talk about some of the details behind the changes and whether it had to do with Braun Strowman's injury, whether it had to do with AEW actually. There's been some reports as far as why WWE made this change to pull Braun Strowman out of the Royal Rumble match against Brock Lesnar and instead put Finn Balor in there. Now, Nick, before we get into kind of the discussion of it and our opinions and our thoughts, tell us what we do know about the circumstances leading up to this change.
Well, really, it's more about what we can rule out.
Sure.
And that is any kind of theory or rumor that WWE is pushing Finn Balor right now because of All Elite Wrestling, or any offers that might have been on the table to Finn Balor from All Elite Wrestling, or just any interest that maybe they had expressed. A couple of weeks ago, it was reported that, and I don't know if this is so much of a report, that WWE stars are keeping a close eye on All Elite Wrestling, but I feel like that goes without saying. If you are a professional wrestler in the business, you're keeping an eye on everything that's going on in the business.
Sure.
Certainly a development like All Elite Wrestling, which could become another option, another place for you to work, is something that you're going to keep an eye on. And I think anyone in any business does that. If you work in a bank, you keep an eye on what's going on in other banks, because if you want to change jobs, you want to move over to a different company. So, this idea of WWE stars keeping a close eye on it seems sort of self-explanatory to me. But again, there also could be, and because Cody Rhodes worked in WWE for so long and he has a lot of friends in WWE, who knows what kind of discussions are being made?
Sure.
Who knows if the Zack Ryders and the Kurt Hawkinses and even the guys who are on a higher playing field, like the Finn Balors, maybe an Apollo Crews, guys who are maybe frustrated with the fact that, they're just not breaking through to that next level. Who knows what kind of conversations they're having, side conversations they're having with somebody like a Cody Rhodes or the Young Bucks and saying, hey, if I ever did entertain the idea of coming over to AEW, what could you do for me? So, and I'm sure Vince McMahon and WWE knows that, new competition arises. It's just another place someone could go work. So, is WWE, is this whole shakeup a response to All Elite Wrestling? Could be. I don't think it's a response to that specifically. I think it's just probably something that, look, this shakeup is really no big surprise for WWE. It's nothing new. They do these shakeups all the time. They just kind of did this one out of order. It usually happens, couple days, the week after WrestleMania.
Right.
They'll do some kind of a roster draft or a superstar shakeup, or they'll call up some NXT names. We saw that with Shinsuke Nakamura, Asuka in recent years. So the idea of the shakeup is nothing new. The timing of the announcement of the shakeup, which was just days before All Elite Wrestling made their announcement, and Vince McMahon was absolutely aware that this project was going to be announced. Chris Jericho even admitted himself in an interview publicly. He said he had notified Vince McMahon of this, so he knew the announcement was coming. That timing definitely seems a little suspect, and it could just be WWE's way of saying, hey, let's try to freshen up our product if, in fact, a new competitor is on the scene. So as it pertains to a guy like Finn Balor, no. This push is not coming because AEW was trying to lure him away, or he was threatening to leave, or there was some offer on the table. This push is coming because this is part of WWE's plan to freshen things up. And certainly if you look at Raw this week, Raw, even in the past couple of weeks, we're seeing new faces. We're seeing guys like Apollo Crews. We saw EC3, Lacey Evans, and Heavy Machinery all make brief appearances on Raw this week. So Finn Balor is just part of this equation right now to sort of freshen up the look of Monday nights and Tuesday nights in WWE.
Well, and I think as you mentioned, ruling out certain things that may have taken place that would cause this change. The other thing on you've got Finn Balor covered. It's not because of AEW interest or anything along those lines. On the Braun Strowman side, there's been reports about maybe it being that he's not cleared, which apparently he's not completely cleared at this point because of his elbow injury to wrestle. But that's also, again, not the reason why. They assumed he'd be ready to go by Royal Rumble. We don't know if he will be, but they did assume that he would be ready. Apparently also kind of conflicting against those particular reports, Nick. He was this has been in the works for a few weeks now. They continued to build up Braun Strowman versus Brock Lesnar. That's kind of a tactic they use in marketing as a big main event match, only to kind of pull the plug and change it last minute, but still have, kind of like they did with Trish Stratus and Alexa Bliss, before they changed it to a tag match. It was a situation similar where they kind of want these big marquee matchups being marketed, but then they can kind of pull a bait and switch somewhat. I'm sure this goes back plenty of years, and it's not the first, obviously, handful of times that it's happened. So Braun isn't injured, and then there's also been a report as far as even more details about maybe Braun Strowman's push and his momentum slowing down a little bit, which is why Vince maybe made this change. He's already lost to Brock Lesnar. They didn't want him to lose again to Brock Lesnar, and so obviously if there's... But I think this is a telltale sign, Nick. Look, I think another part that we have to kind of look at is what might happen as a result. I don't think it's a smart idea if you're a Finn Balor fan at this point to get excited by any stretch of the imagination by this change. Finn Balor's getting a little time in the spotlight. That's good. I mean, he hasn't really had anything close to this for quite some time. And so, especially in the last year or two, since he really came onto the scene, they kind of pushed him, and now it's been what we've all believed. And even in the semi-worked shoot promo that he did with Vince, where he talked to him and looked him straight in the face and said, look, you've never believed in me. That's all what we've heard. So we believe there's some truth behind that maybe Vince just doesn't see it in Finn Balor. Can't say that I blame him for necessarily not seeing what some other people see. They just haven't really given him the opportunities. That being said, Nick, we fully anticipate, at least I would assume you do, we fully anticipate that most likely Brock Lesnar retains at the Rumble, goes on to fight Seth Rollins, who really gets the time in the sun, who most likely, if Brock is holding it on to Mania, holding on to the title until then, it's Seth Rollins that takes the title at Mania, and not obviously Finn Balor. But as we've noticed in the first couple of weeks of the year for Raw, Nick, it seems like WWE is definitely trying some more shock and awe stuff, some surprises. We'll talk about Bobby Lashley winning the championship. We'll talk about the limo stuff with Braun Strowman. Everything that they're doing is a little bit more edgy. We'll talk about some of that later on. But my question to you, Nick, is if that's what they're doing now and they're trying to kind of throw some spaghetti strings against the wall, let's see what sticks. The ruthless aggression talk by John Cena and Vince McMahon in their promo and everything, is this their way of saying, like, we may at Rumble shock everybody once again and actually give the title to Finn Balor? How does that lay out in their plans? I don't think it does. That's why I'm saying, I'd put all my money on Brock retaining,
Right.
But this day and age, they are looking to shake some things up. You can tell that. Is Finn Balor going to be kind of the beneficiary of that?
He very well could be, but I think, people like you and I, and probably the rest of the WWE universe, at least fans who have been watching the product for the past 10, 15 years, are going to be very hesitant to say, yes, the company's going to pull the trigger on a guy like Finn Balor, because they consistently don't. We've seen Brock Lesnar go through the entire top of the WWE Raw roster, even defeating Braun Strowman. People forget. I'm sure people don't forget. WWE wants us to forget that Brock Lesnar pretty quickly defeated Braun Strowman in the main event of a pay-per-view for the title. And so I think people like us are always hesitant to say, hey, okay, look, if the reality is, and if you're a major Finn Balor fan, as I am, and it's really great to see him getting this push, the cynic in you could say, well, the only reason why they're doing this is because, of course, Braun Strowman is not 100% cleared to wrestle. So, okay, let's do that. Like you said, that little bit of a bait and switch where let's promise the Strowman match just for a couple weeks, even though we know it's not going to happen. But we're putting Balor in there. My question becomes, what if Braun Strowman was 100%? What if even before New Year's, he was cleared to return to the ring?
I think the change
would Balor be getting this push?
I think the change would have still happened. I think, but again, you say it's interesting. You just use that word because that's my whole point here. When you say, would he be getting this push? Here's the issue at this point, and this is the way that I felt throughout Raw this week. Can you really call it a push? And when I say that, because I feel like at this point, Nick, the best pushes are organic anymore. If you're really listening to the fans, you strike while the iron is hot. So to me, Braun Strowman has had the push that organically got him to the point that he's at now. So why not strike while it's hot, assuming he is potentially capable of going in the ring and he's healthy enough? If the plans were weeks ago made, then that's not the reason why they're making this switch. They just wanted to go in a different direction than Braun. They look, hey, he's lost a little momentum. Sure he has. He got beaten 5 minutes by Brock Lesnar. It's your fault he's lost the momentum. Why? But he's still got more momentum than Finn Balor. And as I watched Raw this week, Nick, as it was laid out and set up, throughout the show, from Vince McMahon taking Braun out of the match, to then obviously you get the promo in the middle of the ring with everybody, all four guys and Vince, and then you see, hey, and then what's his face, my old buddy that Finn ended up wrestling in the singles match. Can't even think of his damn name. Jinder, my buddy. When you see that, then you're thinking, okay, now you're going to get, you're basically getting Finn Balor a singles match ahead of the Fatal 4-Way. You knew from that point out that Finn was winning that final match. It was just obvious to me at this point, and it's like, Nick, it felt so forced. And then even the final segment or the final promo of that segment with John Cena getting on the mic and literally like forcefully saying, "Ruthless aggression. I was talking about this is you. Blah 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 blah. Raise your hand because I'm again handing off the baton." It's like, good God, that felt forced.
Well, at that moment, yeah, I don't feel like everything from sort of the Braun Strowman opening to the Jinder Mahal match leading up to the Fatal 4-Way, I didn't feel any of that was forced, really, because I am in the camp of believing Finn Balor really deserves this.
No, sure.
Tell that the live crowd really wanted it. I mean, they have been supporting this guy for so long.
Sure.
And really, okay, you want to strike while the iron is hot. Yeah, you should be striking with Braun Strowman. Of anyone, you should be striking with Seth Rollins.
True.
Seth Rollins is the man on WWE Raw right now. And I feel like 2019 should be the year of Seth Rollins.
And I think it will be, though. I think it will be. I think it still will be.
And Rollins, though, isn't going anywhere.
No.
Braun Strowman isn't going anywhere. Finn Balor was moving into that danger zone. He was getting to that point where fans are going to start giving up on him. You know, it's that sort of Dolph Ziggler territory. It's that bit of that Matt Hardy territory where fans are going to start saying, you know what, it's just not happening for this guy. So we're not going to get behind him as much as we have in the past because it's just getting all of our hopes up for nothing. So I do think it was the right time to strike for Finn Balor. And I felt like that was, yes, maybe not so much organic because he hasn't been on this giant roller coaster ride that has led him to this point. It was sort of just WWE saying, okay, we're pulling the trigger on this out of nowhere. Fine. I'm glad to see it happen. Yes, though, I'll give you the John Cena bit at the end. You know, John Cena said in an interview not too long ago, that's his job in WWE now, to pass off the torch. And I really was thinking during that segment, I thought he was going to actually have, like, you know, the torch that the Statue of Liberty is holding. I thought he was going to actually have that in his hand and hand it over to Finn Balor and, you know, set him on fire with it, you know? So yes, it definitely seemed like, you know, I'm big bad John Cena and I'm giving you my stamp of approval. I'm not sure what that stamp of approval really means to an audience anymore. I don't know publicly what that means. I think, for me, I don't necessarily need to see John Cena cut that promo. John Cena taking the pinfall in that match, that's what does it for me. Saying that, here's a big win.
Exactly.
That was the biggest win of his career, really, maybe aside from winning the Universal title. And of course, it was cut short, very short with the injury. But no, I felt for the most part. And you know what? Here's the thing, Chris. I think that raises a good point that I want to make, which is that I don't necessarily think everything has to be organic. Look, this company, you write the show. You know, when you're watching television shows, if you're watching any of your popular television shows, a lot of these shows are mapped out.
Oh, of course. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
And yes, certainly. Certain characters might, you know, they may do focus groups or test groups or something like that. And certain characters might emerge as, oh, you know, the fans are really taking to this character. And you've certainly heard many stories about, you know, I actually remember a story about in The Sopranos, if you remember the girl that played Christopher's girlfriend, the hell was her name? She died. They killed her off.
Yeah.
In the series. Adriana. You know, she had said in an interview years ago that she was only supposed to be in like 3 episodes of that show, but she caught somebody's eye. She gained a little popularity with the fans. So, okay, they increased her role, but that's the exception, not the rule. So, you know, in WWE, they have that same power where they're saying, hey, look, you know, this is our show. We're writing the show. We're creating the show. If we want to decide that suddenly a character is now going to be a bigger part of the show, that's what they should do. That's what they can do, you know? And and I think, yes, they've done it in the past with guys like the Batistas and the Roman Reigns, where maybe the fans have rejected it. And then I think in that case, you have to respond to what the fans want. But I really do think in the case of Finn Balor, this is WWE saying, all right, you know what? We're deciding we want to do this, and we know it's a guy that the fans are going to get behind because Finn Balor is definitely a big fan favorite on the show.
And I'm not disagreeing with that. Again, I don't think everything can be organic, and I think you can set, you know, kind of plant seeds to kind of enact and kind of jumpstart an organic reaction, especially when somebody has kind of the skill set that obviously fans these days kind of look for as far as the ability in the ring and all of that. But look, I think what's going to end up happening here, and I think it's going to be the ultimate say-so, is like as we go through 2019 here, you know, later on in the year, we're going to look back at this and say, all right, really, who benefited from this? And I don't think hardly anybody's going to benefit from necessarily this. If Brock wins, goes on, faces Seth, Finn Balor gets lost in the shuffle again, you know, even if they try to keep him somewhere stronger in the mid card, you know, I feel like as we look back, we're probably going to see, unless again somehow they swerve us all and Finn Balor actually wins this match and goes on to main event Mania. I don't think that's in the cards. I just feel like we're going to be looking back at this as kind of a missed opportunity, even if you want to call it that. I felt like it was a little forced. I feel like it's sudden. It's part of a shakeup, and it's something that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense because you've got Braun Strowman, who's also, keep in mind, missed a lot of opportunities. We thought he was going to win the title months ago. And yet everything keeps getting delayed for him as well. And yet Vince then wants to blame that some way on him for saying you've lost momentum. It's like, what do you expect? I mean, you keep kind of getting me at this peak, at this pinnacle, and then nothing happens. And then I go back to being a comedy bit. Setback. Well, the injury, but before the injury,
that ties into losing momentum.
True. But before the injury, he again had a couple of opportunities that you thought his rocket ship was launching, and it just never really did. He keeps getting relegated back to a comedy bit guy, and then we're supposed to 2 weeks later take him more serious. It's just a lot of confusion, I think, at the end of the day, of which direction they're going to take a character and stick with it.
Well, I think, and hopefully maybe something that they're learning too is you're pushing these new stars, which is great because, you can't fault the company too much for these direction changes because things happen. Injuries happen. Roman Reigns,
I agree,
leaves the company because of his leukemia diagnosis. And that is inevitably going to change things. The problem is what WWE always does is they just take those one or two top guys and they change them.
Sure.
It's like, okay, well, Roman Reigns is out, so we've got to make Braun Strowman a face again. Well, why not? Because he was a heel. Instead of flip-flopping him 2-3 times in 1 year, why not elevate? Why didn't they elevate Finn Balor then when Roman Reigns left? Keep Braun Strowman that heel if you're going in that direction. Sometimes I feel like, and look, these things are going to keep happening. It's always going to happen in wrestling. Injuries are going to happen. God forbid an illness or something like this happens. Someone takes time off. Somebody lands a movie. We've seen it with even guys like Dean Ambrose, Becky Lynch, The Miz. They take time off to do some of the WWE Studios movies. There's always going to be reasons why, when you're doing a week-to-week show, that you have to change creative plans.
Agreed.
Well, they always want to go back to the same well of superstars that they change directions with because they only view a finite number of talents as their top guys. Well, this is why building guys like the Finn Balors, rebuilding guys like the Dolph Zigglers, even a Bobby Lashley with his title win, it gives you a plethora of talents now to play around with when one guy goes down with injury or for whatever reason has to miss a significant amount of time.
Well, and I think kind of as we wrap this up, I look at WWE, and I have for years, kind of like let's say like a 6 to 8 lane highway, right? Interstate, where you've got 3 or 4 baby faces on one side of the oncoming traffic, and then on the oncoming traffic, you got your heels, and at the end of the day, it's like swerving into like head-on collisions and shit between those 4 lanes. So you got pretty much 4 cars on each side going opposite directions. Baby faces, heels, and it's like, these are your stars. These are 4 guys. At any point, one car from any lane on this side can swerve to the first lane and head-on collide with the one coming in that lane, or they can swerve for 3 lanes, and they swerve. Like, you've got 4 guys on each side. That's the way it should be, right? Back when you had Steve Austin and obviously The Rock, before that you have like Diesel, HBK, all of these guys. These are your top guys, right? Bret Hart, etc. Back then, it's like, at any point, the problem now I see with NXT and all these new stars coming up and WWE's kind of indecisiveness on who to use and who to put in those lanes, that's my issue, because it seems like it changes any given moment and it can continue to change. You've got Drew McIntyre, you've got Seth Rollins, you've got Braun Strowman, you've kind of got Brock Lesnar up there because he's sticking around a lot longer than anybody planned on him to. You've got Dean Ambrose potentially somewhere in that mix, and then obviously it's like where then Finn Balor is kind of being thrown in there again. So for me, my only problem is you got to start picking these lanes. You got to pick the lanes and decide who are those interchangeable guys, so you're not left in these types of situations when a guy like Roman Reigns, who you've put everything behind, then ends up leaving because of an injury, or Braun Strowman gets taken out because of an injury. Then we're not sitting here talking about a Finn Balor push and wondering whether it's going to amount to anything. Really, are we going to be excited about it or not? Because that's how I feel about Finn Balor right now in this match. It's like, why should I care? Because look what's happened to him in the last year and a half, and if he's going to be one of those mainstay guys, you've got to ride that wagon for a while. It's just, fans' attention spans may be shorter than they used to be, but good God, WWE feels like they're so short that they're not even worth messing with. It's like whatever we feel like doing on any given Monday or Tuesday, we're going to do it. And I feel like there's got to be at least a little better structure at the end of the day. But here's what I do know. Finn Balor deserves the opportunity. And only Finn Balor and the fans are going to dictate what happens after this match at Rumble. Because if the fans really, truly support him like you do, and like obviously a big number of people do, they're going to be all over themselves, at this match, hoping there's a chance he wins this thing. And then as long as he looks strong, which I'm sure they're going to give him his time in the ring, they're going to make him look strong. He's going to probably lose. But then what? What happens after that for Finn Balor?
Well, that's what I was just going to say here to sort of wrap up our main event. Let's test our cynicism, so to speak. I'll put you on the spot. You can put me on the spot. Does this push, okay, let's not call it a push. It's an opportunity right now for Finn Balor.
Right.
Does this, after the Royal Rumble, does this flourish into a main event level push for Finn Balor? Let's not even, let's just take out the title. Are we going to both agree we're both going to go with he's losing at the Rumble?
Yeah, I'm 90% that he loses. There's still
I'm going to stick to that, and we really only have one more Raw before the Royal Rumble. So I'm sticking to he loses this match. Is he going to have a great showing, much like AJ Styles did against Brock Lesnar at Survivor Series, a couple years ago, and he has that amazing match which really sort of erased the loss. Can he have that? Absolutely. Do I think this is going to be a 2-minute squash match? No, I don't. I think this is going to be a really great David versus Goliath match, and I expect Finn Balor to have his moment, but I don't expect him to win. But the question is, will this flourish into a full main event level push for Finn Balor, or is this just because Braun Strowman wasn't ready to go in time for Royal Rumble and Finn Balor is our consolation prize?
I don't know that it was because of the Braun Strowman thing. I think it's just because, WWE doing the shakeup decides, obviously it's known that Finn Balor has been deserving of an opportunity. This is Vince McMahon. All right, then are they giving us a one-time? Yeah, are they giving us a one-time shakeup here? Yes, I believe this is more of a. We're going to give you one opportunity here to show us where you're, and we're going to dictate. We're going to see what the fans react. But I think this is almost more of a pacification of the fans, and the idea behind the shakeup, and them saying, "Look, we're giving you what you want, people." So that way, when they then revert back to doing what they ultimately want to do for the big shows like Mania and their big stars, et cetera, then they're at least saying, hey, we gave him the opportunity, whether he succeeds or fails. If he succeeds beyond their expectations and there's just no way around it, like obviously several, Daniel Bryan being one of those guys that there was no way around his push. There was nothing WWE could do about it. If Finn Balor turns into one of those, absolutely, he's going to end up, rising above all of this. I'm going to say the chances of that are lower, though, than otherwise, because I just feel like this is them pacifying the fans, kind of giving them the idea behind a shakeup, even though we're still not unclear whether that's really going to happen ultimately or not. And so I think this is WWE's, again, kind of them thinking this is what the fans want. I'm going to go under if that's what we're doing here, kind of the over under on the chances of him actually ending 2019 at a main event level. Because their Mania plans are probably pretty much, for the most part locked in as far as the top end card. I'm not gonna dictate his entire year based off of this Rumble event, and then Mania. Like they're still well beyond that he could get into the main event picture and have a title run again or whatever they want to do. I think the best opportunity for Finn Balor and the most likely is that, hey, they give him this opportunity over here while he's on Raw. Maybe after Mania, when you talk about the shakeups they normally do as far as the two brands, if they don't end the brand split like you were kind of predicting maybe, that he goes over to SmackDown and gets a little bit of time to shine over there with whoever is the champion, the couple of guys over there. Maybe that's the best case scenario for a guy like Finn Balor, but I don't think it's going to happen on Raw this year.
I'm going to agree with you. I think there was a definite root of truth, an entire tree of truth to what Vince McMahon said during that promo last night. It kind of felt like it was Vince McMahon versus the live audience. It was
right.
Vince McMahon saying, I really never have believed in Finn Balor. And you know what? Forget about even that idea of him not believing in him. Finn Balor just doesn't fit the prototype, and Vince said it. He said, what did he say? There's all this meat in here.
Meat, yeah.
There's all this meat in the ring and you don't belong. And that's how Vince has always perceived the top stars. They're the big giant guys. They're the larger than life guys. They're the John Cena's. They're the Drew McIntyres. They're the Baron Corbins. They're the Braun Strowmans. It blows my mind to sit here and say, Finn Balor is small compared to these guys because Finn Balor is jacked. He is ripped. He is in fantastic shape. But the fact of the matter is he's not as tall. He's not as thick. He's not as over-the-top looking. He's not as superhero looking as those other guys I mentioned. And that's always going to be the benchmark for Vince McMahon. And so I feel like this is Vince McMahon's way of saying, okay, fans, we're going to do it your way. We're going to give you what you want. But at the end of the day, I still, even despite this shakeup, even despite this, we're going to give you what you want, I still think Vince McMahon can't get out of his own way. I still think his ego is too big, and I think Balor is going to lose to Brock Lesnar, and Vince is going to say, "See, I told you, this nobody wants to see this guy," and it's going to sort of be back to that upper mid-card status for Finn Balor because Vince McMahon is going to have his way at the very end.
Well, and also, again, a quick distinction in my mind as far as Raw and SmackDown. Vince is still very, very much hands-on with Raw.
Oh, yeah.
I think SmackDown, clearly there's a separation there of the minds behind it, and I think he'd have a lot better opportunity to kind of thrive over there because Vince isn't nearly as hands-on with SmackDown as he is Raw. And so we'll see, obviously. But that is the main event for the Voice of Wrestling. We want to know what you guys think, so please comment below wherever you're watching. And let us know. We're going to come right back, though. We got some AEW to talk about, and there's still some other shakeups we got to talk about on Raw. Obviously, Bobby Lashley is Intercontinental Champion. We also had new tag team championships revealed for the women. So there's other things, obviously, to discuss. But we will be right back here on The Voice of Wrestling. And we're back live on The Voice of Wrestling. Chris Cash, Nick Paglino. And Nick, look, we talked a lot about AEW last week on the lost episode of The Voice of Wrestling. And so
I don't know that we really explained that enough to people, that we did record an episode of the show
long show. Had some audio difficulties.
We played it back. It ended up that Chris and I were speaking in German the entire time.
Right.
It's insane because neither of us know that language. Neither of us have even been there. But the whole show was in German. We're actually going to release it over in Germany. We had David Hasselhoff was our special guest. So it's going to go over huge over there. Big. But unfortunately, no one here would be able to understand a damn thing that we said. So we weren't able to air it. And we did talk a lot about All Elite Wrestling, but there have been a couple new developments in the AEW front since last week that we can touch on this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really what it comes down to is kind of we were talking about Finn Balor and the idea of maybe that being the reason behind his push. And even though Dave Meltzer and a couple others have reported that that's not the case, that's not the reason. And Nick, you and I have speculated, we've discussed whether or not Vince McMahon himself is keeping up. I'm sure another billionaire involved in the pro wrestling business, Vince McMahon, is not naive to realize that, no, it's not going to happen tomorrow, that the Monday Night Wars, he's not threatened in any way as far as going out of business. It's not going to happen anytime soon if it ever would happen or could happen. But let's not think that the pro wrestling business is unlike any other industry out there, and that 5 years from now, WWE couldn't decline enough that it could obviously put up some that they'd have some situational events take place that could change. And a guy like Tony Khan and the billionaire family behind AEW is the type of situation you would probably have to have for that to ever happen. But regardless of that, the idea that WWE superstars, first and foremost, are taking note and keeping up with what's going on with AEW and realizing that the signing of Chris Jericho and the interview, Nick, that you mentioned before we went on the air, where he talks about the money that he obviously is getting in this deal, you know that it is a relevant thing in pro wrestling right now. Unlike anything else that we've seen in quite some time, this isn't Impact, this isn't Ring of Honor, this isn't even New Japan, obviously. This is a upstart company that has billionaires backing them, that 100% are in line to get a TV deal, a significant TV deal. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume TNT is their destination. But either way, it will be a significant TV deal. And they've got guys like Chris Jericho. They've got they've got a ton of momentum. They've got kind of, fresh minds behind the product. They've got a major supporter and believer in an owner. And so, look, there are everything that you can think of that is right for this situation is there in AEW. And as we talk about the idea of Finn Balor, Nick, and the idea of, hey, what guys from WWE could have eventually jump ship, especially once they're on TV regularly and there's notoriety that comes with that. It's not Finn Balor right now, Nick, but I think, the conversation you and I really wanted to have is the significance of Tony Khan and the billionaires backing this company, and how money and obviously longevity at this point, kind of as a direct result of that money, that AEW is going to allow for any wrestler that ultimately wants to come over, especially those that have some credibility, some name recognition, that might want to jump ship if they're unsatisfied with WWE, because this is going to be the first company, Nick, since TNA's earlier days that I think is going to have the ability, Nick, to potentially convince those to potentially come over if they are disgruntled or whatever in WWE. So while obviously it's not yet, and it's not a guy like Finn Balor, I doubt there's hardly anybody seriously looking at it right this minute.
Right.
But I bet you 50% of the WWE roster is considering it as a forethought, as a possibility down the road.
Well, yes, and I had mentioned this before, to you off the air, and I think it's so worth repeating over and over again that, if you're a professional wrestler, you are keeping an eye
100%.
On what's going on
Yes.
in the world.
Yeah.
So this report that's kind of been circulating over the past couple weeks, saying, hey, WWE talents are keeping a close eye on AEW. Of course they are. Everyone is, not just WWE talents, any professional wrestler. It would be like a football player, or any athlete. It would be like it'd be like a player for the Dallas Cowboys saying, well, I don't pay attention to what happens on any other football team in the league. Are you nuts? Of course you're keeping your ear to the ground in your business and what's going on in your entire business. And this is a new opportunity. This is AEW for a professional wrestler is just yet another place they could possibly work. So it's very exciting for those people. But I think, and as you mentioned, what we really have to understand here as fans, because as fans, we don't deal with the money. We don't see the contract. We don't see them sign the contracts. We don't even know how much a lot of these guys are being paid. We may know rough estimates. We may know it's a big money offer. So for us, we're not focusing on that aspect of the business. And remember, it's called a business because it's all about business. I think we cannot underestimate how big of a deal it is that the Khan family, that a billion-dollar family
Right.
is backing this promotion.
Right.
Because when you talked about Impact Wrestling, you had Panda Energy that was backing them for years and years. You had the Carter family. They didn't have anywhere near as much money as the Khan family. And also remember, these weren't pro wrestling fans, and even Dixie Carter. This is someone that said, hey, let me try wrestling. It was almost like when someone goes and buys a toy pet dog, to just, you know what? Let me show everybody my new little toy.
Well, also she learned on the job and got taken advantage of as a result of her naivete. And I think that Tony Khan understands the business to a point where he knows the stuff that Dixie didn't. You know what I mean? Well, he's not going to be taken advantage of, A, as a business fan, but B, as a business fan that also kind of knows the shit that can go on in the wrestling business with wrestlers especially. That's not going to happen this time around in my mind.
Yeah. That coupled with the fact that I think he's going to know his role in this and say, this is Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, baby. I'm going to let them make those creative decisions. I'm not going to be the Dixie Carter that is on the dirt sheets all the time and making creative moves and suggestions and putting myself on the air as now you never know. I mean, I don't know, but I'm going to guess that these guys are smart enough to know, okay, you're the money, and certainly there's going to be the decision making that he has to make. But I think as far as the product that we see, I think that's going to be Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks and the guys. I think he's going to trust the talents that know this business to run the creative side of this. You know, but as far, again, taking it back to the point of significance of the money, Chris Jericho has made 3 very important, or what I believe very important statements in the past couple of weeks. The first one came, they did the all or nothing, the double or nothing rally in Jacksonville. And he came out as the surprise signing for AEW, and he said, this is not about the money. I have all the money in the world that I need. This is about doing something new and something fresh that I believe in. Now, okay, someone might argue, if we had Chris Jericho on this show, he might argue that was an in-character promo.
Well, but it's also half true.
Jericho. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think where you're going with this, obviously, is what he maybe said in this interview, and I think he can make that statement and still be mostly true. He doesn't need the money. I mean, and might be the distinction here. Now, if what in
other words. You can hold him accountable for the things he said at that press conference.
Sure.
I don't think that was an in-character
thing
where it was, that was all storyline.
Right.
I'm going to take him for his word. I'm going to assume this guy, we know he's made a boatload of money just in the past year working with New Japan.
Right.
He's made tons of money with WWE. I'm going to take him at his word that he doesn't need the money, okay? Then he does an interview within the past week in which he somewhat changes his tune.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, this was the second interview that he did. He did various interviews throughout the week, but in the interview he did with Busted Open Radio, he said, look, I wouldn't have even entertained the idea of signing with All Elite if I did not know that they had a very, very real, very, very serious television deal
on
the table. Okay, so that brings you a little closer to where his head is.
Sure.
I'm joking. I'm going to let you respond to what I just said so I can take some water.
Well, yes, I think that at the end of the day, I think that you start kind of peeling open the layers of Jericho, and I think that it does start getting you a lot closer to why he is going to sign. If they didn't have the money, he wouldn't be signing. I mean, that's why he's not with an Impact or whatever. If they didn't have the TV deal, he's not going to sign, which is probably another reason why Impact, even though he's close with a lot of the people in Impact, why didn't he go there? He's making good money in New Japan, and he's doing something better. I think at the end of the day, though,
great point.
There's no doubt that the legitimate money, the real money behind Khan and, of course, AEW as a result. I think plus coupled with the idea that he knows he's going to be on TV. Look, one or the other, I think, changes his mind. But I think the TV deal is really significant, Nick. I really do. I think that, yes, it's a big thing that he's getting the money, and then obviously he had a deal that he simply could not refuse. The money is a big part of that. But TV is probably just as big in his mind. If they were going to continue running six live events every year and running them on pay-per-view and everything like that, Jericho isn't so quick to jump on board that ship in my mind. If he knows at the end of this year, though, they're going to line up a TV deal, and by the end of this year or first of next year, they are going to be on TV with a majorly syndicated TV show, that is the other kind of significant point and the final nail that I think would ultimately lead him to sign. Besides the money and everything, I almost feel like those circumstances are more important to him than the money. The money is just icing on the cake that makes it hard for him to say no.
Again, though, and this is definitely worth noting, in the third statement he made, the first being it wasn't about the money at the rally.
Right.
The second being the significant TV deal is what influenced him. Then he did an interview with Chris Van Vliet just a few days ago in which he said the Khan family's involved in this project suddenly, and next thing you know it, I'm being offered the biggest deal of my career.
Right.
That's what he said.
Right.
The biggest money deal of his career.
Right.
And he couldn't say no. And we know that he was negotiating with WWE up until the end of December.
Yeah.
So I don't want fans to be too naive and think that a company like AEW is going to land top stars like Chris Jericho just because the product is cool.
No,
just because they have a grassroots feel.
Right.
This is real life business.
Yes.
And it takes more than that to lock down a Chris Jericho. You want a Finn Balor? You want a Finn Balor to jump from WWE? You want a John Cena? You want a Braun Strowman? You want a Dolph Ziggler? You want the guys that are lingering around that all the fans say, God, why doesn't Dolph Ziggler go to AEW? These are the reasons why. Because at the end of the day, when WWE can say, I can give you more money, I can give you more I can sign you to a 5-year guaranteed money deal, that weighs so much more than any cool creative idea, than any grassroots project, than any creative freedom that they could get in any other company. And I think Chris Jericho proved that point when he said, this was the biggest deal I was ever offered. And I couldn't say no. Now, to your point, are the stars aligning in this situation for him? Absolutely. And I think that's what's going to be really attractive about AEW. And that's what I think is going to make AEW such a competitive force. It very well could make them a competitive force. It's that you got the guys like the Kenny Omegas and the Chris Jerichos and even the Cody Rhodes and the Flip Gordons and the Hangman Pages and the Marty Scurlls and, the guys that are on the fence. Where do I go? What do I do? I go to WWE. Well, I go to WWE. I'm not going to have that creative freedom, but I'm going to get the money. I'm going to get paid. I am going to have some longevity. Unless I totally fail, I am going to have longevity there. Well, now all of a sudden AEW comes along and it checks all the boxes.
Sure.
It says, I'm going to get that creative freedom. Hell, I might even get certain perks on top of that, like health insurance, benefits. They've already said if you undergo. Oh, and I want to make this clear too. This has been floating around. They had made some kind of a statement that, it says if you get injured on the job in AEW,
it'll be paid for.
Your medical expenses are covered. Okay. The same thing applies in WWE and Impact in every major company. If you suffer an injury in the ring, you're not paying your own medical bills. Braun Strowman did not pay for his recent elbow surgery. That is all covered by WWE.
Sure.
So that's not a perk that you're going to be getting in AEW compared to other companies. Right. I think that was just meant to say that's going to be we're going to be meeting the status quo.
Yeah,
we're going to be giving you.
And also keep in mind though that I think long term, I think this will have to be revisited because the idea of everything they've mentioned as far as healthcare benefits and things like that, they've also made sure they've put over some of your big stars, clearly. We'll get something, but office personnel, people that are doing other things behind the scenes, which they're making it sound like will include wrestlers. The wrestlers that aren't quite big enough in name value, they're not making us enough money that we're paying for their stuff. We're going to give them we're going to give them a producer role or a title, if nothing else. Some other things they're going to have to do behind the scenes so they can kind of double dip there. But here, keep in mind, once they are a profitable company, which is still going to take, they're putting so much money into this up front initially. I'm assuming it's going to take a couple years before they see that. But if they make it that far and they're still growing and doing everything, and they become profitable, then that stuff generally will start being taken away from a lot of these wrestlers and being given to people that really have to do those day-to-day office things, because the wrestlers they'll be doing their own thing. And I think at that point, they'll have to revisit the statements they've been making. But Nick, let me ask you a quick question, and real quick, before we wrap up the AEW talk, because as we talk about the significance of Tony Khan and the money and the longevity that they ultimately seem to have, they certainly do. Right now, on the surface, they seem to have plenty of longevity ahead of them because money can go a long ways. The contacts and network that Tony Khan has that others, in the business don't have, that are going to land them a potential big-time TV deal, everything that he's got, it indicates, and certainly all signs point to, AEW is here. It's here to stay. It's going to be mainstream, and it's going to be that way for some time. Guys on the independent scene already, whether they have some WWE fame of the past or anything like that, maybe they have some notoriety. I don't think these guys are the ones that I think the significance of Tony Khan really represent. I don't think they're going to be affected as much because, look, they only have if WWE doesn't want you, where are you going? They'll go to AEW just for the sake of it. So some of these internet darlings, some of these guys that aren't known, I think the significance is the Jericho type people. Like I think the CM Punks of the world. Obviously, we've talked about Goldberg because of the relationships kind of in the inner circles that are working with Khan and Cody Rhodes and all of them, the Barry Blooms, all of those guys, the Goldbergs of the world. You can land a Goldberg if you want to. A guy like Dolph Ziggler or a guy like Finn Balor 2 years from now or whatever. The real life mega stars that are going to make a huge dent and an impact right away if they jump ship to AEW or if they sign with AEW. Maybe it's not jumping ship. Maybe they're not a part of, take a CM Punk, for example. Maybe they're not with WWE, obviously. But they're going to make a significant impact just by being signed. Then Tony Khan, and not all these other perks too, the TV deal and everything like that, and clearly longevity, maybe on a lesser note, the healthcare stuff, all of that. But the money at that point then that's where the significance to me comes. Look, Nick, if I want to use a guy like The Rock or Stone Cold, but again, CM Punk is a prime example. CM Punk can get paid whatever he wants at the end of the day. There'll be negotiations and stuff, and he's not going to be crazy unreasonable, but if Jericho is getting the biggest money offer as the very first big-time signing that AEW's done, and I still don't put Jericho on a level of some of these other guys they could ultimately land, Hey, Conrad, Nick, did an interview, and I thought it was interesting real quick before I turn it over to you to kind of respond to that. And again, that I think there's a separation between your typical guys, Nick, and obviously your guys like, CM Punk and Goldberg and these other mega stars that could come over. I think the significance of Tony Khan is more in their favor than it is in just everyday independent guys that may have some notoriety because they've been on Ring of Honor, they've been in New Japan, they've done some things across the scenes. But Conrad put over an interesting point as far as Chris Jericho kind of being like Terry Funk was for ECW. They were around the same age when Terry Funk went over there and brought over some name recognition to kind of help everybody else and stuff. Jericho's kind of that similar fashion. I thought it was very interesting. And Jericho, yes, he could be your main event star, and he will be probably for some significant time going forward. But he's there ultimately as an ambassador more than anything else. They're not looking to get 5 to 10 years of Chris Jericho on top of their company. No. He's just there as an ambassador. I think that there's going to be other guys that fall in those lines, the other guys that they can bring in because of Tony Khan that other people haven't been able to. Yeah, go ahead.
He's a proverbial gateway drug.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Right. He's the guy that, okay, wow, they got him.
Yes.
Well, if they got him, like you said, the other top names may see it as a realistic thing. And by all accounts, Chris Jericho's a smart guy. He's made very smart business moves in the world of professional wrestling. If other wrestlers know that, they may say, hey, you know what? If Jericho's doing it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and let's not forget, Nick.
I still believe, Chris, and you tell me if you agree, they need more than Jericho.
100%.
As it stands right now, Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, Chris Jericho, they're your top stars in that company. They need more than that.
No, they have to have more than that. They need 4, 5, 6 guys that can kind of carry their company a while they start developing other big-time players in their own company. And I think that's where it's going to be the most, because, again, the people that are following some of these internet darlings, including Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, they're not enough. They're not a significant amount of people enough at this point to launch a mainstream pro wrestling brand into the millions and millions of followers and customers more so than anything else. There's got to be sales at the end of this. Pay-per-view sales, a platform online, obviously enough eyeballs for advertising. They're not enough. You've got to have some mainstream appeal. And then, of course, the thing that I think is going to separate them also, Nick, is I think that Tony Khan is going to understand the value of legitimate marketing. Keep in mind, when Impact was at its hottest and they were still getting 2 million people watching them every week, it was a big difference between what WWE was putting out there, even though, again, ratings-wise, it seemed pretty legit at the time. But even Kevin Nash and all these other guys would go out there and say, look, when I worked there, I'd walk down the street and they'd ask, when are you coming back to WWE? Are you ever going to wrestle again?
It's the example that I've used on this show a million times. RVD did an interview at some convention.
Yeah.
He was the Impact Wrestling champion.
Yes.
And some kid came up to him and said, hey, RVD, when are you returning to wrestling?
Right.
He said, I'm on Thursday nights. Every night I'm the champion of Impact.
And
this
was back when they had a TV deal that I think they Impact just thought that was the answer to their prayers.
They were on Spike TV.
And it's not. And look, that's the one thing. Say everything you want to say about WWE. When they go to a city, they're there. They do massive marketing all across the globe, and I think that's the significance as well that Tony Khan will bring. Not to mention some of the more modern. He's just a young guy. This guy is a young dude ultimately, and he's a billionaire that knows what he's doing. He obviously understands the importance. He's owned an NFL team, for God's sake. He understands how to manage this type of organization. So I think Tony Khan is very significant, Nick. We're going to be talking about AEW going forward. It gets people excited about wrestling again, and it's already, and I agree with your earlier point, Nick, WWE might not be, they're not going to be admitting that they're making any changes because of AEW, but I think they will be forced to make some changes as this thing gets off the ground.
Without a doubt.
And so it's going to, literally AEW is already making a huge impact in the wrestling business right now.
Cody Rhodes, Kenny Omega, these guys are doing interviews where they're saying they are turning down massive deals from WWE.
Right.
The Young Bucks turning down a deal that had, think about what the incentive package was there. They were going to turn the Being the Elite show into a WWE network show. They were going to give these guys, I think, a 6-month out clause.
Wow.
That says if you don't like what we're doing and you don't like it here in 6 months, you can get out scot-free.
Yeah.
If you think WWE is not paying attention to these companies, and remember, I say pay attention. I don't say scared.
No,
I don't say feel threatened.
Right.
I don't say, oh my God, everyone's running around like chickens with their head cut off saying they're going to go out of business. That's not what WWE's thinking. They're taking note and they're saying, hey, you know what? Let's stomp this thing out while it's in its very infant stages, because they knew the bottom line. If they got Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega, this All Elite Wrestling project dies.
Yep.
So they knew we get those guys and we kill off potential competition.
Yeah.
Hey, it didn't work. The competition is there now. So certainly. Are they going to have to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak? Yes. And with AEW coming, for all those fans right now, and we can end it on this. This is my final thought on this. For all those fans out there right now that are doubting this current WWE shakeup, for all the fans out there that are saying, WWE is like the boy that cried wolf. They do the shakeup all the time. Nothing ever happens. It's the same old, same old. For those cynics and those people, and hey, I'll tell you, a certain percentage of me believes that way because I've been watching WWE for so long. For those people who believe they're not going to stick to their guns with this shakeup, the emergence of AEW might be something that keeps WWE on this new trajectory.
Yep.
Because they want to keep their product fresh. They want to keep it more engaged than it was before because there is, even though it's very, very young, a new kid on the block.
Nick, before we wrap up, I want to kind of do a couple of rapid fire to cover some of the other topics of this week, and we can kind of give our thoughts real quickly and briefly on those because they are significant enough. I think that we can spend a little bit of time on them. First and foremost, another big thing took place on Raw this week with Bobby Lashley. You know, you and I have talked about Bobby Lashley plenty in the past as far as kind of just his immediate, return that just did not go very well. The stuff that he did with Zayn just didn't go real well. They finally turn him heel, and you start seeing some momentum immediately and some changes with some shift in how they want to use him. And we didn't ever really know how far they'd get because they'd had so much time at this point under their belt with just a complete flop and a failure of a return for him. But yet here we are now on Raw, and he wins the Intercontinental Championship, Nick. And I guess my quick question to you is, the shakeups and everything you talk about, like this was just kind of a surprise. Dean Ambrose really hadn't had the Intercontinental Championship for very long. We kind of thought that was a good role for him, obviously. And they make a big shift like this. But then, so the live crowd was obviously extremely excited about it. I thought great for Bobby. That's great. But then in retrospect, you start thinking about it. You're just like, okay, that was cool. It was interesting. Didn't see it happening. A good, solid match. Bobby's the Intercontinental Champion. Awesome. But then you're looking, it's Bobby Lashley as your Intercontinental Champion. Now going forward, how excited are we with Bobby Lashley as the Intercontinental Champion? I mean, it was neat for the moment because people didn't necessarily expect it. But again, is this a kind of another forced item that we've got, on our plate here that we're really not that excited about, Nick? Or is this a good opportunity and a good thing that they did for Bobby Lashley going forward and the others involved, by the way, especially Dean Ambrose? We kind of know what the trajectory for Seth Rollins is, or at least we assume we do. But what about Dean Ambrose, obviously, who doesn't make a lot of sense for a follow-up with Bobby because they're heel versus heel, really. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense that he's going to just keep going back and forth with Bobby Lashley with Seth out of the picture. So what happens obviously for Bobby, and then of course Dean Ambrose going forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, I want to try to remain positive about the shakeup. It's, to me, whether or not it may have felt a little forced, out of left field, I don't think it did. I mean, they have clearly been trying to put more behind Bobby Lashley in recent months, pairing him up with Lio Rush, which I think there were parts of that pairing that people didn't like at first, but I feel like they found something now that really works with the pairing of Bobby Lashley and Lio Rush.
Well, also, Nick, real quick, let me just say though, I don't disagree with you, but I think all of the shakeup, just in general, the overall ambiance now of some of the decisions they're making week after week, for especially this first couple of weeks of the new year and stuff, it just, as you look at it all in totality, it seems somewhat forced. Not necessarily one after the other. I mean, if one thing had happened, it'd be one thing. But when you look at it all, it just feels like maybe these weren't their plans originally,
It tends to look like spaghetti up against the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly.
But you know what, though, man? I'm kind of all for that. I mean, if it is giving talents opportunities, it's like if they decided to bring back the Spirit Squad, I would say here's a horrible surprise. You know what I mean? But what they are throwing up against the wall is good by me. I think everybody wanted to see Bobby Lashley be used better and used more, and in a bigger, more prominent, more serious, more important way. People want to see that with Finn Balor. People want to see these talents. No one's complaining about the NXT names that they're seeing. EC3, I always felt like he was a guy that belongs more on the main roster in WWE than in NXT. Lacey Evans, she's ready to go. Heavy Machinery could be a good addition. So I think, yes, it may feel like, also because they're bombarding us with this. it's not like, I mean, think about it. When was the shakeup announced? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Right.
And look at how much we're seeing. It's not like they're slowly rolling this stuff out over the course of the year. We're only midway through January.
Yep.
So we're getting hit with all of this at once. And yes, it may feel clearly like WWE is actually just taking a rock and throwing it into the still river and just totally disrupting it.
Yeah.
But I'm liking what I'm seeing. I'm looking at the guys like the Lashley and the Finn Balor's and a guy like an Apollo Crews, and I'm saying to myself, finally, it's about time. And, is it all going to work in the end? Is some of that spaghetti going to fall off the wall? Probably. But
I agree.
I have to give them a lot of credit for what they're doing right now.
I think still, though, as we look and then kind of on the Dean Ambrose front, you think about what did he really gain as the Intercontinental Champion? I don't know that he did much. And so I feel like that's the problem. And look, I hope Bobby Lashley will be different in that regard. But look, WWE is obviously still high on Bobby Lashley. They clearly are. They want more out of him, and I think that's good. And nobody deserves it more than a guy like Bobby Lashley. So I'm perfectly fine with the change. Again, I do think some of these decisions they're making that seem like they did come completely out of left field are because precisely they came out of left field. And I don't know that that's the way to drive your company, even if you're trying to do a shakeup and put it under that umbrella. I feel like you have to have some definitive reasons of why, some logic behind it at the end of the day. And right now it certainly feels like the spaghetti string syndrome, and it's like, when does that end? When do we start seeing, okay, now Bobby Lashley's your champion. Let's see Bobby Lashley as a legitimate champion. Let's see him gain something from that, because it's been a long time, really, Nick. Miz is really the only guy in the past, 5, 6, 7, 8 years in my mind that's truly gained as an Intercontinental Champion and added some relevance to that title. So hopefully a guy like Bobby can make that happen. And again, you need a solid mid card with the amount of talent they have, everything like that. It can't be all about the Universal and the World Championship. It's got to be heavy in the mid card.
Title's not there every week. The Intercontinental title is.
Yep. So you've got to have that strong, and obviously Bobby is a part of that now, and hopefully he'll stay there and they'll get some good out of it. Real quick, also the other thing, during the Alexa Bliss segment, we get the reveal of the new women, which we heard about, the Women's Tag Team Championships coming about, which I guess now at this point they're going to do an Elimination Chamber match, Nick. 3 teams from each side, Raw and SmackDown, so 6 teams, which has there ever been a tag team Elimination Chamber? So that's interesting.
This is a historic match in many ways.
The announcement kind of fell flat because of the segment and just the way it didn't really come. People weren't quite as excited as they could have been, maybe if they revealed it a different way, but nonetheless, it's on the table now. It's on the board. Here we go. And I think, Nick, what's really good about this is that obviously we haven't seen any definitive real tag team women that put themselves over, that are competing on a regular basis as a tag team. But this is going to help tremendously people like what's the group? Riot Squad, and isn't there another one on SmackDown that's similar kind of? That's I can't think of.
Well, you got Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. The former Absolution.
Yeah. So I think those two will clearly benefit. I think there's some front runners, and those would be the ones. I don't think Ruby Riott would necessarily be a part of it. I think she's kind of maybe destined for a little bit better things as a solo star, but the other couple in hers, I think are going to be kind of a heavily favorited person in that match. And I think that as you mentioned, obviously the former Absolution girls, I think could obviously be a pretty good favorite. And so look, it's another title, especially with a growing women's division. The fact that they can compete every year in a 30-woman Royal Rumble shows you how much talent they clearly have in the women now, in the women's division on both sides of the coin with Raw and SmackDown. And they're adding more, as we've seen on Raw. And of course, we'll see on SmackDown, as they mentioned this week, they're going to be, kind of swapping shows and stuff as they gain some experience. But Nick, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, are you at least excited somewhat about the tag team, championship specifically? I guess really
I am, and again, anytime titles come out, again, it's the person that makes the title, right? It's the story that makes the title. To be honest with you, I'm more excited about the announcement that yet another historic women's match is going to take place. You know, we've got an Elimination Chamber match with the women, tag team women in the match nonetheless. So this just, you know, again, this goes back to what we said at the top of the show. For anybody that was complaining about the Alexa Bliss segment, and trust me, I agree, it was completely unnecessary. I still have no idea what the purpose of that segment was other than to show a little bit of Alexa Bliss's skin. You know, it was gratuitous. I saw a lot of complaints from it on social media, people saying, oh, it's that attitude era concept of WWE exploiting women. Well, you know, okay, you got about 20 seconds of that, and then you have this major announcement of the Elimination Chamber match with the women. And so this is just another example of WWE showing that they really are serious about pushing the women in a very, very serious, very, very meaningful way. And really, I'm excited about that. You know, we will talk in the coming weeks. Once we know the teams that are competing in the match, we'll talk about who we think will win that match, who we think should win that match, should become the new tag champions. But I'll tell you this, the tag titles, you know, if they added another men's title, we'd say, we don't need any more men's titles. If all of a sudden mid-heavyweight title, we don't need that. The women need another title. So when you feel like another title is necessary, that tells you that you have a growing division in popularity, a growing division in significance within WWE. So yes, I'm looking forward to this, and I am looking forward to that match at Elimination Chamber. I mean, look at what we've got coming up in the next couple of months for the women. We've got the second Women's Royal Rumble match coming up. First time ever the women are going to be an Elimination Chamber match, and there are heavy rumors that the women could headline WrestleMania 35. And if that happens, you've got an extraordinary few months coming up for the women, including the tag team titles.
And I also think it's just going to help add depth to the overall division. I mean, giving women more things to do versus, you know, you've got your Raw Women's Championships over here, you got your SmackDown Women's Champion, and those people competing for it. This gives more depth to everybody else. But on that note, as we wrap up, Nick, real quick, the idea, you know, that you mentioned a lot of people upset over the Alexa Bliss segment, which I agree was pointless, but I also didn't care, didn't mind it. It was fine as long as Alexa is completely okay with it herself. Right. It's just what it is. It's no different than a movie or a TV show. I mean, it's just trying to add character to Alexa Bliss, I guess. And
comedy gag, you know what I mean? I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, you said it. You hit it right, nail right on the head. How many television shows? How many movies? You know, somebody walks into somebody's room. Oh, I didn't see you there.
Well,
they're changing their clothes.
They're actors.
Some people might have laughed at it. I didn't. I guess I didn't see it. Didn't fit the context of anything, so I don't really know why. But I think a lot of people latched onto that. So that's kind of why they felt like it was. The whole thing was only about seeing Alexa Bliss somewhat topless.
But that's also,
you know, I do feel like it's nitpicking and it's being harsh on WWE to harken back to the Attitude Era and say, oh God, this is a giant step backwards for the women's division. That's just judging them.
No. Okay, so I agree with that. It's not a giant step backwards for the women's division, but I am kind of curious, Nick, to real quick as we wrap up, your final thoughts, as people have mentioned this, the idea of them trying to be more edgy. Last week, you know, we had Sasha Banks saying bitch on TV, which is something that was very, very direct. You knew they were going for that moment. It was very much pre-planned. And then, of course, this week you get the backstage segment, which you've been getting a lot more of those in general. And so I think that that segment does not happen before the shakeup, though, Nick. So whereas I don't think fans' criticism are warranted in the sense that it's a step backwards for the women or that this is some way saying that we're going back to the Attitude Era. I don't agree with any of that, but I do think that this was a direct cause and effect of you've got shakeup and then you got new things, and that segment would have never happened before the shakeup. So is that something as far as the women are concerned, Nick, as far as specifically women? I mean, in that regard, do you think they were just testing that out, see how it played out? Do you think we're going to see more of that type of stuff as we go forward?
It's very possible, because with WWE, if they fall back on some of those past ideas and those past, because hey, we were even talking about this off the air. I mean, when you really look at the difference between the Attitude Era and now, obviously, or the Divas era as opposed to now, it was, the change is really more what's been going on in the ring and the storytelling.
Right.
The women are involved in real matches now, long competitive matches, serious matches. Their storylines are competition driven and title driven, and we're not seeing the bra and panties matches and the lingerie pillow fights, whereas before the emphasis was on the women's sexuality and their bodies and just exposing their bodies on television. Now it's about them as performers, them as competitors, them as athletes and talents, and their ability to perform like the men can. But other than that, the women visually are presented similarly. They're still scantily clad, dressed. I mean, no better example of the fact that, the women weren't allowed to travel to Saudi Arabia, and they and when they traveled to Abu Dhabi, they had to, I think it was when they went to the United Arab Emirates, they had to cover up.
Sure.
They couldn't wear their traditional gear because it exposed too much flesh. So, the women in WWE are still dressing the same. You see a lot of cleavage. It's still very provocative. You're still, Ronda Rousey has to adjust her. We've talked about this. It's to adjust her shorts all the time because they're riding up. She shows a lot of leg. They're showing a lot of skin still, so that sex appeal is still there, but there's nothing wrong with that. My wife watches wrestling and she loves to see Randy Orton in a wrestling trunks because she likes to see his body. Okay, these are good-looking people that are in tremendous shape. Showing off that body and that sex appeal, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing different than in any other form of entertainment or in films, or modeling when you see the people's bodies and the way they look like that. So, yes, though, overall, are they tapping into with the women a little bit, maybe them cursing a little bit, getting a little dirtier, getting a little racier. You got John Cena referencing ruthless aggression at the end of the show. You've got some of the male talent that are cursing more. Sure. Are they getting a little more risque, a little edgier with their product? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. You're still working within the PG confines.
Sure.
Go watch a PG movie. You'll hear people say bitch and damn and shit, and you may see a little cleavage, and you may see women in underwear and men, but there's no nudity. There's nothing that's taking this into an R-rated realm. So they're still working within a PG-rated confines. They might just push that envelope a little bit more. And hey, you know what? Good. I'm glad they are. Maybe it'll attract a wider audience. Maybe it'll bring back, an older fan. Maybe it'll just appeal. It'll just give you a little bit more because they're pushing that envelope a little bit more, still within the confines of PG. I really don't have a problem with it as long as they're telling good stories and they're not exploiting their talent.
And I think my final thought on it is we're pinpointing those types of things because they just announced a shakeup, and here are things that they hadn't been doing, which is why I still look at a lot of these new decisions and a lot of these things that are playing out on Raw or SmackDown as clearly that's a shakeup thing. Clearly they're trying something new. I'm ready now for the day where whatever they're going to be doing going forward, we kind of get to the point where, hey, that's just the way it is now, and so we can just kind of start isolating those things and saying if it's good or bad versus versus it feeling forced because of the shakeup. Like all of these things right now we're talking and kind of highlighting because it just seems like that had to be part of the shakeup. And I think So either way, obviously we're going to keep up with how things are changing and transitioning over on Raw and SmackDown. It clearly, you can see the signs, some of them subtle, some not so subtle, obviously, of some of the things that they are trying to do as part of the shakeup, and I think AEW, as we talked a lot about today, Nick, is going to continue making them think about how they're presenting their shows as you get kind of a younger, fresher, hipper version and wrestling company that's coming onto the scenes now, especially when they start getting some national TV.
At the AEW rally, they had those cheerleader women in the back.
Right.
mean, look
loved
at
it.
boxing.
I loved
Women
it.
are walking around in string bikinis with the cards. MMA fights. They got the women at the weigh-in that are standing there.
Sure.
They're literally wearing bikinis.
Yep.
You know, the AEW was no different. They had hot women standing behind them at the podium. What was the purpose of those women? They serve no other purpose than to be eye candy. There's nothing wrong with a little eye candy.
Nope.
As long as you have substance to back that up. And no one can argue that they aren't putting substance behind the women in WWE right now.
Good point. I love it. Obviously had plenty to talk about, went a little over, but hey, that's what we're doing here on The Voice of Wrestling on Fight TV, guys. We appreciate, as always, you tuning in. Really enjoyed it. We're going to have to start getting some more guests back on the show, though, and bringing them on. In fact, I know one that I'm going to reach out to, hopefully bring him back here very, very soon to talk some AEW and our good buddy Billy Gunn, who is their solo producer as of now. Hopefully he'll come on and talk about this new company and how much he's looking forward to it. Excited for him. But guys, we appreciate you tuning in. That is Nick Paglino. I am Chris Cash. This is The Voice of Wrestling for Fight TV. We'll see you next week.